Okay, before I get too in-depth, which actually I guess you can see by the condition of the radio, it's already kind of in-depth, but this is a Motorola CB555, which is their AM sideband radio. This one's mainly, I don't want to say a bitch video, but someone else had worked on this. Not going to say who. It was a radio shop. But they had done a channel modification on this. And if you look right in here at the PLL can, see this big gaping hole with the rough edges? They cut it out with a pair of tin snips. I don't know what to say other than, are you shitting me? I don't know what was going through their head. I don't see why it would have been. I don't know if they tried, because you look at the other side here, you can see there's the traces are ripped out for the can, so I'm going to have to fix the circuit traces because they're broken out around the can. I mean, they obviously had to get under this radio to start with. These two wires right here, the yellow and the green, that's part of the channel modification. So it's not like they didn't have the chassis pulled to be able to get down there and solder those two wires on and cut one trace. So they were obviously on the underside. How hard would it have been to properly desolder all of the pass-through hold-down tabs for the PLL can and just unplug the module, take off a ground wire, take off a ground for a tantalum capacitor right there, and just remove the can. If you needed to get in there, that's the proper way to do it. You had already done the majority of the battle, which is getting this chassis extracted out of the radio, pull the faceplate and get it extracted so you can get up to get to work on it. There's just, I don't know if I want to say dumbfounded or lost for words. I just can't. How someone with a clear conscience, a shop, not the owner, an actual shop, do something like that. And then here's some more of the modification. See all these cut off wires. Now these, because they still have, they had to be jumpered back together, part of the channel modifications on the switch right here. So to, of course, flip the faceplate back up. So okay, you can see that's the PA CB extend. That switch has been repurposed. The on-off and the SWR RF meter switch is still being used. But this is the one they repurposed for their channel modification. So they had to reconnect a bunch of those wires. So any of them that they had to solder together, they did put a piece of heat shrink on. But even these, if you look, see that? I just pulled it, just barely even touched it, and it just fell off. So the main thing is you've still got other wires in here that are exposed. And, down in here, there's all kinds of, all these wires that are just hacked off. There's wires there. They're all over the place. And this is an area you really don't want to be getting any wires, especially if they were to come up in this area. This black wire right here, turn this light back off. This black wire right here, come on camera. This thing's been giving me focus problems here recently. Okay, that black wire, that's the 120 volt line. So right at that point right there, there's 120 volts, okay? All feeding in this area here. So you don't want a bunch of bare wires just out bouncing around. That's a good way to energize the radio chassis with 120 volts. Not to say it's not I don't want to say don't care about the radio, but I mean, in the long run, the radio burns up one thing, but what if somebody touches the back of it? Because, it's not a lot of it, because it's mainly plastic. But there is a hole here, and there's metal passing through, and God forbid something would short out and somebody touch something and get electrocuted, because, in the process of shipping or the radio moving around, one of those little wires bounces around and touches this damn 120 volt line. Somebody plugs it in and it's touching the chassis or something and gets, killed, So just stuff like that. There's just no call for. I guess the other thing would be, as you can probably see, like I said, this is a CB555, okay, and this is nothing more than a CB550, which was the mobile radio. And actually, this is a mobile radio in a slightly larger case with a power supply, because as you can see, there's the mounting for the mounting bracket in a mobile application. So this is literally just a CB550 just stuffed into a plastic box with a 120 volt power supply. And there's a transformer, regulator circuit, capacitors, and then where normally there'd be the switches would be here, they removed them, and the switches were moved down here. So that's really the only difference. Otherwise, that's just a mobile radio, which of course kind of poses some of its own problems to start with, because your audio, now they were nice enough to put this nice plug right here. What is that? There's a lot of pins in there, right? Oh, you see that and you think, man, I can just unplug that, unplug the power supply, pull the chassis out to work on it. Well, it doesn't. Well, of course it's had the channel modification, so it's hardwired, but even if that hadn't been done, you still can't get it out. There's still 3 more wires hooked up that go down to, on the underside, way down in here, they go to the microphone jack down here. They put all these nice plugs in here, but there's still wires hardwired over to this side of the board. So when I work on them, I just unplug the plugs so you're not putting any undue stress on them, ripping wires out of the board, or, on or off of the boards there. And then, so it stands up and doesn't fall. It's kind of heavy on the back side. That's where the circuit board is, so it wants to fall over that way. I just put a spring clamp attached to the chassis here. That way I can prop it against that. And then I'm going to be doing a full recap job, replacing all of the electrolytic capacitors in this. So I'm going to get it spun around here. So when I'm working on it, it'll be sitting pretty much just like this. That way I can get in with the desoldering iron, from this side, and pull the parts out from that side. Normally, mobile radio or most base stations, you just stand the whole radio up on end, but of course, that's all solid plastic. And that screw you see down there, that's just a foot. That's not like there's a bottom panel you can cut out, so you have to, stand it up. So the easiest way to do it, like I say with these, is just stand it up, lean it against, stick something down in there, shoot to that little hole. You could even prop a piece of wood up down in there, but just give it, basically you're giving the chassis a jack stand to set up against, so you can get to the solder side, like I say, with your solder sucker, desoldering tool, and then you can still get to the components, to pull all the capacitors out from this side. So, like I say, the main thing I wanted to like I said, I guess it was mainly a bitch video, was you're going to work on radios, try to do, I'm just still, flip this back around, it's still just dumbfounded. Now, if I remember right, I think the customer had told me, and he knows the other shop did this. I think I can't remember offhand, but I believe he might have even said that he was there when this was done. And the guy said this can was mainly for, to meet FCC regulations for, spurious emissions, emissions coming out of the radio. Well, any emissions that are going to be coming out off the chassis here and leaching out through the cabinet, most of that is so small it's not what you're worried about. The emissions they're mainly talking about are the ones coming out of this coax connector, okay? They're worried about filtering in this radio to make sure that it's only, signals in a 27 megahertz band mainly that are coming out here, and that you're on channel, adjacent splatter, adjacent channel specifications, so splatter. That's mainly what they're worried about. When you see cans like this on the inside, now there is a shield here, and yes, that will prevent some leakage, but that's the actual RF. There's really no high energy anywhere around here. It's fairly small signals. The only place there's going to be a lot of RF energy is final transistor to the coax connector. Very small area, and that's shielded. Now, yeah, like I say, that can prevent some leakage out of the cabinet. These cans, and it's the same reason all of these coils, all of these coils are always in a metal can. There'll be a couple of them, might not have a shield around them, but they all have these cans. Those cans are shields. They're not there for looks, and they're not there for mounting. because if you, now not in this radio, but most all of your modern mobile radios and base stations for that matter, if you pop the covers, anything from a Cobra 29 to Galaxies and Rangers and whatnot, if you look at in the back, right about, if this was one of those, if you look back here, you'll find one of these small coils. It doesn't have a can. Doesn't really need one. Cost extra money, so why stick it on there? So like I say, they use them where they need them, and they're used for shielding, and it's the same thing with this. And that shielding prevents signals within the radio from interfering with other signals in the radio. It's not really to prevent signals from leaching out into the atmosphere and, disturbing your neighbor or the guy down the street. The amount of energy in this area is so low, the guy next door would never hear it anyhow. It's to prevent one part of a circuit from interfering, causing distortion or mixing. You can get all kinds, because like I say, this is the PLL, the VCO circuit. So you could have all kinds of weird mixing problems, and that's actually a good way to get harmonics coming out here, is doing stuff like this, because you're allowing the wrong signals can now have this big hole to get into. See, normally it's just these little tiny holes for each of the either the alignment cores in these transformers or the variable capacitors down in here. There's just a small hole, and then this one small hole that was for this plug. But to just butcher out the rest of it, I literally am just left. I'm going to take a picture of that and print it, kind of one of those hang on a wall, just to say, and put a little bubble box above it that says, with an arrow that says, "Are you shitting me?" So, like I say, this was mainly a gripe video that if you're going to work on your radio, it doesn't matter who does it. Another shop, yourself, the guy next door, good friend, doesn't matter who. Don't do things like this. It's not that hard to, either with a, and I understand a lot of people may not have a professional, big desoldering unit like I have, but you don't need anything more than just a, standard soldering iron and some solder wick. You could achieve the same thing. This is faster, but this works just fine. But do it right. Unsolder the couple tabs that pass through and pull the can. So there's my bitch for the week.